Good afternoon, everyone. Hope you've had a good lunch. So I have the honour today of moderating, a panel discussion amongst a lot of distinguished guests that you see sitting in front of you. I think, as you've heard from the introduction, Tier 2 and Tier 3. There's a lot of talk about it. Personally, I'm from a little Tier 3 city called London in the UK, so I'm still learning about some of these places. But I'll show a few charts in a minute just to tee up the discussion. But what we're trying to do today is really to try and get across some thoughts, some insights from key leaders who are already operating in this space. So, the panelists that we have today represent a wide range of industries, and I think those industries each have their own unique challenges, their own unique opportunities. So I think what we're going to hear today are some nuggets about how they're thinking about Tier 2 and Tier 3, and the sorts of things, the sorts of advice that they feel is important for others to be able to do the same as well. So we have about 75 minutes to do this. I'll tee off with a few charts. I'll then talk to the panel, and then we'll have an opportunity for everyone in the audience to ask questions as well. So we'll try and save 15, 20 minutes at the end. So that's by and large how we'll run it. So a little bit of context, and I think everyone knows this. India, the opportunity is immense. I think we all know that. We're all excited by it. We're all in this market. Even if there are a couple of economic bumps in the road, the growth rate in India is still a number that is to be envied by the rest of the world. I think there are a lot of unique aspects to India. The complexity is clearly one. If you look at the retail environment, it's another. If we look at modern trade actually is very small still. It's quite nascent in India. But the flip side of that is that modern trade opportunity in India is probably the biggest retail opportunity in the world. And I think particularly with FDI and other initiatives coming through, then it's going to become an increasingly important and competitive space. I think there are other things that are unique about India. I think we've all seen the confidence of the Indian consumer, and whilst it's wobbled a little bit in recent months, if you look globally, India actually still has the second most confident consumer in the world. Indonesia just tops India at the moment, but just. And as you talk to audiences in India, almost without exception, people fundamentally believe that their children's lives are going to be better than their lives, and that's a great opportunity for the future. But I think with that, you also have a value consciousness, which is quite unique. India has the most value conscious consumer in the world. So I think for companies that want to succeed, they have to be able to capture the need to provide that value and that scale all in one. But I think also, as it says on here, there's an increasing opportunity in what we call the premium, the masstige segment. Certainly if you use FMCG as a benchmark, then actually the premium segment is growing faster than the value segment, which surprises some people. But it does show that there's an aspirational consumer out there that wants to embrace technology. And even as you look at Tier 2 and Tier 3, what's interesting is that Tier 2 and Tier 3 consumers actually say that they're prepared to spend more on telecoms than their major metro counterparts. So this aspirational consumer is really everywhere. So it's a big opportunity. We've got about 400 million consumers, in Tier 2, Tier 3. And as we talk about the Indian middle class, probably Tier 2, Tier 3 is really what a lot of people think of. These are the people where their incomes are rising faster than other parts of India. These are the consumers that are becoming increasingly thirsty, for a better life. These are the people that are becoming better and better connected. They see what other people have and they want to have it. So I think, almost whatever industry you're in, it's no longer a strategy of just win in the major metros. Increasingly, companies are thinking about how do I win in Tier 2 and Tier 3. And I think, as you may hear today, there are an increasing number of companies that are actually saying, let's go after Tier 2 and Tier 3, and maybe the metro opportunity is something that we're not actually as concerned about. So maybe we'll explore that, when we get into the discussion. And if you look at the stats, and this is FMCG, so it is just a proxy. But if you look at the second column along in blue, this is the growth rate in same-store sales in FMCG over the last 3 years of Tier 2. So you can see that sort of growth in Tier 2 has really outpaced all of the other sectors in India. If you look at sort of all India, rest of urban, which we'll use as a proxy for Tier 3, then you can see that throughout 2011 it posted the highest growth. So one of the things we are seeing when it comes to FMCG demand is it's percolating down to what we call small town India. And there's an increasing number of products, which are getting into that space, increased range, and that's really fueling a lot of the demand. And I think when you talk to consumers, and we've done a lot of studies on this, then you see that a lot of their aspirations are similar. We'll explore today where the differences lie, because I think that's very important as well. But when you ask them, what is it you want? A lot of what comes out through group discussions are things like, I want to live well, I want to look good, I want to eat well, I want convenience. A lot of the same types of aspirations, that sort of consumers in other parts of India actually want. And, in all of these sectors, it's reflected in demand. So, as we look at sort of, I want to live well, you see, sort of in Tier 2 and Tier 3, you see a lot more being spent on in-home entertainment, on activities. You see a lot of upgrading of televisions. You see a lot of upgrading, of mobile. And even when you look at FMCG categories, some of the fastest growing categories in Tier 2 and Tier 3 are categories like air fresheners or scourers. Scourers, I think, is up 70-odd%. So it's really, small indications, but it says that consumers in Tier 2, Tier 3 take pride in their home and they want to live better and better lives. They also want to look good. Again, if you look at sort of, some of the fastest growing categories, you see things like facial creams, fragrances, coming through. But even when you look at other aspects, things like recreation, actually more people practice yoga in Tier 2, Tier 3 than Tier 1. You see rise in gym memberships. You see a lot of strategies of leisure outfits. Nowadays, Tier 2, Tier 3 is where they're opening, the new recreation type centres. And you see a rapid growth in personal grooming. You see a lot of the big companies now starting to extend their distribution into these areas because they see that the disposable income is increasing, and one of the big proponents of spend is how do I make myself look good. And again, I think today we'll probably try and expand on some of these themes around wellness, and what does that mean? And they're becoming more and more aware of what it means to live a healthy life. There is a real focus on health and nutrition. Here are some of the types of categories that again are growing very fast. So if we talk about FMCG growth growing at about 15%, this is the index on top of that 15%. So you can see that there are multiples of growth in a lot of the types of areas that sort of are going to make consumers feel better, and they want convenience. As we start seeing evolving modern trade and the pros and cons and the debate between I want lots of choice versus I'm prepared to shop around lots of different stores, I think we are starting to see that people want to use their time more wisely. They do want convenience, and that convenience might manifest itself in the home, in the kitchen, in the types of way in which they cook and provide for their family. It also is translating itself into the ways in which they shop as well. We know that there's more and more what we call crossover shoppers. So people that are visiting the bigger stores with the wider ranges and then doing top-ups elsewhere. This is a trend that we actually see. So I think the Tier 2, Tier 3 opportunity is pretty clear. And what we're going to explore today is how a number of leaders in different industries are viewing this opportunity. How do they see consumer needs different from that of the metros? What are the challenges? Because it's easy to say Tier 2 and 3 is an opportunity, but in reality there's a lot of pitfalls that can actually arise. And we will explore a little bit maybe some of the business models that might actually succeed in that place. So these few charts hopefully act as a little bit of stimulus, for the panel today. And what I'm going to do just to get the ball rolling is I'm going to actually ask each panelist to try and spend just a couple of minutes, if we could, just quickly talking from their own perspective about their business, how they view the Tier 2, 3 opportunity, and what they think are some of the considerations for companies in this particular space. So I think with that, Amit, I'll get the ball rolling with yourself.
Thanks, Justin. I'm really glad and excited to see the presentation and the content. And I wasn't really knowing about it till now, what's happening in Tier 2 and 3. And I think we are going to expand more in Tier 2 and 3 after looking at this. E-Teens is the name of our brand. We have 52 stores currently and rapidly expanding. And 49 of those stores are in Tier 2 and 3s. We're doing pretty well, but there are a lot of challenges too. We serve kids. We manufacture and retail for kids from 2 to 14 years. We manufacture and retail apparel, footwear, and various accessories and sell them through our stores. I also want to share we are the biggest licensees in kidswear in India. When I say licenses, I mean to say we have various licenses with us like Barbie. We have Doraemon apparel. You want to buy Doraemon apparel, you have to come to us. We have Spider-Man with us. We have Popeye. So we have something like 17 licenses with us. I think we are one of the biggest licensees in India. Tier 2 and 3. I think there's a misconception that, I'm sorry I'm starting with a negative note over here, but I think there's a misconception that especially Tier 2s are very easy to manage, very easy to take rentals in these towns. Salaries are low, but I don't think that's the case everywhere. I suppose it's going to be an interesting discussion once we move forward. And maybe there are many, many more points which I would like to put. Before I give this to Justin back, I just want to share that the most important thing, of course, is the location where we are going to start the store or where the store comes in Tier 2 and 3. But another very important point is the connection of the brand with the customer. Of course, that goes everywhere in metros also. And to top it up, the price points. The price points are very important to consider. Thanks.
Good afternoon. I think it's a difficult session after lunch for most of the people. So without taking too long, Tier 2 and Tier 3 market for a brand like us, I represent Liberty, which is into footwear. And I would say footwear for a more mass audience. We target the middle segment. And I see the greatest or the highest growth coming from the Tier 2 and the Tier 3 markets, where most of the metros have a large number of stores, and there were most of the consumers were coming from far-off places, Tier 2 and Tier 3, especially in the fashion segment, to shop. And slowly the country is moving towards the convenience. And in the presentation also, everybody is wanting to look good, looking for better convenience. And same is the approach with all Tier 2 and Tier 3 town. People have started spending a lot more money on fashion, which is a changing scenario. And they're looking at convenience rather than waiting for 2 or 3 months for making a shopping trip to a larger town. There is a more opportunity for them to shop if there is a convenience given. And the moment brand is available in Tier 2 or Tier 3 towns, where there are not too many company-owned or branded stores in that market space. So the response what you get when you open the store and the connect of the brand which gets in that local area is very positive. At the same time, where Tier 2 and Tier 3 markets are very exciting, there are a lot of challenges as far as Tier 2 and Tier 3. It looks very low cost and cost effective. At the same time, I think there are big infrastructure issues, from basic things as there are power cuts and there's no electricity. There could be training issue of manpower, because when you start hiring local people, the amount of energy you need to spend on training them to sell in an organized atmosphere is a lot more. To keep the brand standardized all across, I think the hygiene factors, what you like to follow across markets. So there are challenges in tier 2. Nevertheless, it is very, very exciting, and the more penetrated brand becomes. Like my friend just said, Amit, about the price points. I think tier 2 and tier 3 towns are very, very price conscious. The amount of development you would like or the brand needs to make in making the right product for these markets is very important. We cannot just go with the same product, because they are mostly fashion followers there, and they are very price conscious. The amount of disposable income which they have, which they can spend, is very limited. So it is very important to do the right product innovation for them. I think these are the few areas people definitely should keep in mind. And if there are any questions later, we'll definitely take it up. Thanks.
Good afternoon. It's my privilege to be part of this panel, where most of them are our, I shouldn't be saying, but they're all customers here. And most of you who are sitting in front of me are customers. I represent Tyco Security Solutions. We provide or we facilitate retailers to do more and more open merchandising. And as they move into the tier 2 and tier 3, we have a lot of challenges, as he just rightly pointed out. Power cuts. No power, how do we make the electronic security solutions work? How do the retailers give the same touch and feel of a store in a metro, because they have built the brand and they've kind of given they would love to give that same touch and feel to the customers in the tier 2 and tier 3 town, and not to differentiate, but however they have different set of products that they need to cater to those markets. Hence, we are then forced to innovate and provide the right kind of solution sets to give them the right touch and feel to their consumers. Their consumer experience has to be the best for them to grow in their tier 2 and tier 3 markets. And we're talking about tier 2 and tier 3. I don't know, probably one of us will say, there are 25 towns, 30 towns that we're looking at. But at this point in time, I can tell you, we provide services to 324 towns across the country, electronic security solutions. The market is becoming more and more mature and more aware. So the challenge for all of us, both in the retail industry, in the right ways to provide the right kind of product and the services and the right consumer experience. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Rahul and I represent Jilly, the diamond jewelry brand, the first diamond jewelry brand of the country. We started in 1994 with the concept of branded diamond jewelry in the country, where the product is sold on, a breakup basis, which is the cost of the diamond, the cost of gold, labor, etc. And we were trying to sell it at a fixed price. So first challenge came into the metros, because we are trying to challenge the consumer buying behavior on diamond jewelry. As a strategy, obviously, first was easier way was to enter the metros, and therefore we expanded in Bombay, Delhi, Bangalore, and in most of the metro cities. 2006-07 is when we started looking at the tier 2 or the 3 markets, which we call. At that point of time, obviously, modern retail had not moved in those markets, and we had to look at a different way of entering these markets. So two options we had in front of us is one is do a company-owned format and enter those markets. But then there are challenges in these markets. First challenge: these markets are small. Everybody knows everybody, and that becomes a challenge, because if you try and get a store manager to run a business in those markets, and if he doesn't know everybody, first the guys don't trust him. Second, okay, he doesn't know everybody, so for him to build the business is going to take time. So for us, we had 2 options again. Take the distribution route, and the other one was take the franchise approach in those markets. And that's what we did. We started with distribution business to enter some of the markets, And in some markets which had a certain size, we decided to move through the franchise route. And surprisingly, I was talking to Justin that in 2008, 9, 10, when we had a global economic slowdown, our business actually grew because metros were, kind of, trying to fight the recession, but the tier 2 and 3 towns were the ones which were actually giving us the increase in sales because those guys were not really affected so much. And that gave us the strength that, yes, we were on the right track and we continue expanding in the 2 and 3 markets. So, we'll see stores coming in markets like Tinsukia, Ganganagar, Yamunanagar. I mean, some of the places we ourselves are surprised. Like, there's a small place where we open our franchise store in Jagdalpur in Chhattisgarh. And it's surprisingly for us, the demand for solitaires that come from these markets actually puts questions in our mind, where's this money coming from? And, the demand is so high, compared to some of our metro stores also for solitaires. We're costing lakh, 2 lakh, 3 lakh. So for us, tier 2, 3 markets is the market. We're going to be expanding in this market, along with obviously the organic expansion that happens in the metros and the mini metros. Thank you.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Sandeep. I represent VLCC Healthcare Limited. We're a company which has been in business for about 22 years, and we are pretty much pan-India today. So between our beauty and slimming and fitness centers and our education institutes, we are currently present across 105 cities in 300 locations. And incidentally, about 60% of those outlets are present in what we call tier 2 and tier 3 cities. And our experience has been a mix of both good and bad. The good experiences that you see, these are easier markets to operate in terms of costs. Once you sort of get an idea on how to operate. The other is that for brands like ours, which are pan-India presence, there is an element of being premium that works in our favor. And if you see the comparison between growth, that year-on-year growth or same-store growth that happens between tier 2, tier 3 cities and the metros, it's the metros which are not as satisfactory for us as the tier 2 and tier 3 cities. And that's an indication of the kind of opportunities those exist there. But at the same time, as Anupam mentioned, and as Rahul mentioned, that there are challenges of operating in those markets, specifically, infrastructure. And for us, where the average sort of manpower requirement is of either qualified professionals like doctors or nutritionists or physiotherapists, and on the one end, and then skilled people like hairstylists on the other end. The challenge is manpower in terms of retaining that, in terms of recruiting that manpower, and then on top of that, retaining that manpower. Because once you recruit them, you train them, and they become very good at their jobs, their aspiration always is to move to a larger city for more money and so on. So like I said, the challenges are there, but at the same time, if you were to compare the challenges with the opportunities, I still think that the opportunities continue to exist and grow. Incidentally, an interesting point is that, our top 4 earning outlets tier 2 cities, and that's and they've been consistently the top earners for about 5 years now. So that probably gives you some insight into how well those markets.
Hi, I'm Sandeep from Home Shop 18. We are a 4.5-year-old business. A very unique business. I think we're the only business, at least in the country and in the continent, which is trying to build a QVC and an Amazon at the same time. We have a dedicated 24-hour home shopping channel and an e-commerce business. For us, no difference between the metros and the tier 2, tier 3 at this moment. Both markets are growing. The opportunity is huge. The only thing similar is that whether it's a metro or a mini metro, as an Indian, we are discount seekers. It's in our DNA or in our blood. At Home Shop 18, we currently do about 4.5 crores a day sort of a business. 55% of that is coming from tier 2 cities, tier 2, tier 3 cities. And both metros and tier 2, tier 3 cities are growing at roughly about a 7% to a 10% month-on-month sort of a growth. The difference between the two markets or the two consumer, the tier 2, tier 3 consumer is much faster to recruit than a metro consumer for us. Metro consumer takes maybe a little longer because he has more choice available in his city. Tier 2, tier 3 has more time on hand, less time, less opportunities to spend, hence the pressure on a share of wallet is much lower than the metro. We are looking at it. I think both markets are going to grow. The opportunity exists like crazy in both. The difference would be that focus on using tier 2, tier 3 more as a recruitment strategy and metros more as growing average ticket and basket size. But again, for us, it's such an industry, it's such a new business that right now differentiating strategies is too early. Fundamentally recruiting everyone who comes on board. Tier 2, tier 3 is a mammoth opportunity. And just to give you a perspective, India has 5,000 cities and about 4,950 are tier 2, tier 3. 70% of the middle income population is tier 2, tier 3. So it's not even something that we should be discussing, debating. We've got solutions of building brands there. The issues are something complete, not about the opportunity. It's more about getting these footprints in place. I think that's where we have an issue, and that's why we keep worrying about tier 2, tier 3 cities. It's our inability to reach that consumer. Second thing is supply chain and quality of vendors who can manage that supply chain along with you. The issues are more there than even worrying about an opportunity in tier 2, tier 3 cities. That's my perspective on the whole thing.
Hi, I'm Sharad Binani. I represent Himalaya Optical. We are really into optical business, and we are more than 70 years old. We have some 58 stores spread across metro, mini metros, and tier 1 and tier 2. What has been my experience over the years operating in metro and tier 1 and tier 2 cities is that metro, when you are going to a metro, you already have a certain class of consumers which are already aware about the brands, about the products, and for them it is very easy to make purchase. But then when you move to tier 2, you will find the consumers are having a very high aspiration for the brands, but because the products are available, so going to different metros or nearby big cities actually to purchase their product. What experience over the years, I have also noticed that these consumers are not very price conscious. I mean, if you are able to deliver a product right to them, and maybe if your brand has a big trust, then the price becomes does not come as a priority factor for them. And yes, there are indeed a lot of challenges in expanding in tier 2, as most of my friends have already said about logistics and obviously supplying the products online. Since we are into optical business, most of the things we cannot replicate in town because we need to have the quality in place, and replicating the entire quality systems will come out to be expensive. So obviously the logistic is a problem, the delivery of the product is a problem, is an issue, because it takes more time what we can do it in a metro. So these are some of the main challenges. Even the manpower, rightly say, a lot of my friends, the manpower, it is difficult when you actually locally recruit them. And when you train them, but the aspiration level goes very high, and they would like to migrate to better cities. Yes. Experience also says that towns which are more closer to the city, and they are better towns to expand. And I've also noticed that once, if you are expanding in a tier 2 cities, it is not only that you can depend on a tier 2 population itself. I have analyzing the data, and I've seen that typically tier 2, tier 3 cities, people don't mind moving even 100 kilometers a day. They can come very easily. Maybe if I have to give you an example, for example, Chhattisgarh, Raipur, we have stores there. We see people every day traveling from maybe Durg, Bhilai, Daspur. They don't find it. They find it very convenient to come down to Raipur and purchase, go back. So that is also a very typical scenario when you are actually expanding in a tier 2. It is like a challenge that you select a city in such a way that it can actually fetch up the extension smaller towns as well. So these are some of the few observations. Maybe we can discuss more in details. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I am Vasudeva Murthy from Bangalore, Ratnagiri Impacts Private Limited. We are the first people in this country to present a franchisee model for the agricultural equipment and machinery. In 2009, launched it. By now, we have around 180 outlets across the country with different formats. Most of outlets are in tier 2, tier 3 cities only. The biggest challenge we have come across by the purchasers, that is, these are the that a great return on investment, but little costly. The constraint is the consumer's capability to purchase such equipment. And since they are unskilled, they are really worried about the handling and operation of the machinery. But with our continuous research, we have created training programs whereby we have overcome that challenge, and we have also pleaded with several governments, state governments. They are able to get this on subsidy prices. Thereby, their power is increased. The agriculturists are able to save 30 to 40% on their labor investment. That's a huge savings, whereby their purchasing power has been increased. Still, the market is big, and we have a challenge is investors or the dealers. Most of the dealers in tier 2, tier 3 cities, just they are sellers. They are not entrepreneurs. Now we have to transform them from sellers to entrepreneurs. And with this experience, tier 2, tier 3 cities gives a greater opportunity for the development, and we have got great prospects in the future. We are doing the research for some more formats whereby smaller towns also will have this. We are providing 3S model, a purchase experience, first of its kind for an agriculturist to see over 200 models of machines at one place. This is a great opportunity we are providing. This is a great opportunity for them to decide which is suitable for them and how it is beneficial. I'll join you with some more information in next round. Thank you.
Those opening comments. So I think we have a lot of advocates for tier 2 and tier 3. So a few points that made there. I think one of the things which came through very clearly was actually around pricing, which was perhaps a little bit surprising to me in that I was hearing that they're less price conscious. I've seen sort of a lot of growth despite some of the challenges. So we also hear that I guess people do customize packs and service levels sometimes to meet the more value conscious tier 2, tier 3 consumer. I'd just be interested in some of the panel's opinions about whether you need to customize your services.
Difference between retailing in a metro and retailing in tier 2, 3 town is that, like I said earlier, everybody knows everybody. Therefore, building that relationship is the key. In a metro, a consumer walks in, buys your product, moves out. But in a tier 2, tier 3 town, since they know each other, they spend a lot of time, have coffee or chai, or, sit together, and that relationship building is what drives your business, number one. Number two, price as a criteria for purchase does not necessarily, become the key thing over here, because you're doing business with somebody. So, at any given point of time, yes, there are going to be discussions that it's little, or, I need something better. So customization does come in our kind of product category. However, it's more about relationship. It's not, since you're buying a very high involved product, which is diamond jewelry, which is the lady is going to be wearing throughout. So it's that customization that really works, the personalization, the relationship that really works.
Amit, you mentioned price points as well. I guess they're quite important in your business. You also said a lot of your factory was already in tier 2 and tier. You're almost going the other way into metros. Have you seen anything different in terms of how you have to customize your offering, or particularly in terms of price?
Not really, because I think the most important thing is we already priced in such a manner, because we're dealing with kids. Kids grow very fast. They need a new per-week or a month. Parents go to buy that, and really not customized. Yes, if we were expensive, we would have customized the product. Maybe buy 2 get the 3rd free, or maybe 3 packs or something like that. Giving a better offer. But we are our a Doraemon T-shirt, 199 rupees. I suppose we want the customer to our store. So, but again, the most thing is, along with customization, why should a tier 2 and 3 customer buy your product? Because there is competition there. We shouldn't just say that there's no competition, I'm there and he's going to come and buy the stuff. No. There are more players, so why should he buy? I'm sure this goes for every place also. So what's the differentiation you're giving? And the first in tier 2s and 3s is pricing. They should afford.
I guess, sort of as a couple of the panelists have also pointed out, we conveniently look at the tier 2, tier 3 as an opportunity, whereas in reality it's many dozens of towns. Just be interested in any views in terms of how do you prioritize where you go? You've got to make some decisions around manpower, around strategy. Is it led? Is it led by operating costs in particular area? Maybe Anupam, from your perspective, can you share a view on how you prioritize?
I think it's very important with growth. Like you very rightly said, it is very important to build the brand, the aspiration, and also to make money and optimize the operation cost. Yeah, I think a lot of people, it is to balance it. The small towns, the tier 2 towns, more profitability and the more volumes, and the bigger towns bring aspiration, the brand value too. And I think it's very important to balance the both. And it is very clear that larger towns, the cost of marketing is definitely high, but you see it from the aspiration perspective. So I think it's a very balanced approach, and you can't ignore either.
Regard, I know you've got a lot of different centres. You said your top 4 performing centres, by the sounds of it, are in tier 2. How do you prioritize opportunities in what a massive space?
The way we look at it is that, given kind of a field that we're in, we're in a high growth industry. The growth is coming across the board, whether it's tier 1 or tier 2. Obviously, to go into tier 2, tier 3 cities, the customization takes place to the extent that there is a price difference of the service provided, but that price difference is not great. It's in the region of about 7 to 8%. But what we are finding in those cities is that there is a greater amount of stickiness of the customer. Once in a metro city, the customer will come to you and may not necessarily continue to come to you because of distractions or whatever you may call it. But we find in tier 2 cities and tier 3 cities that there are customers who come to us and then keep coming to us. So the element of repeat purchase in the smaller towns is possibly higher than what it would be in the larger towns.
That's very interesting, because I guess that that is one of the challenges, I think, of doing business in India. You could argue there is a lot more switching around according to value and according to propositions. So this idea that, sort of the consumer base is potentially more loyal in Tier 2 and Tier 3 makes it an equally more attractive area.
I would say that, relationship counts for a lot in those kinds, especially in the service industry. But I think relationship counts a lot in smaller towns than it does in bigger towns. And the expectations in bigger towns, of course, is on service quality and service delivery levels, efficiency, whereas there is a discerning customer in the Tier 2 and Tier 3 cities, but the way he discerns a good service is on account of how well the relationship is managed rather than anything else.
Interesting. Sandeep, you had a lot of interesting comments there, I think, about views on recruitment, and maybe Tier 2 and Tier 3 consumers aren't actually that different, if at all, from Tier 1. And you also talked a little bit about, sort of infrastructure. I guess particularly in your line of business, I guess infrastructure is important, technology, bandwidth. How do you think about infrastructure going forward as either a barrier or an enabler in terms of your business model?
Well, considering I'm the only virtual retailer on the panel, I just want to address the pricing thing for a second. Contrary to what everyone else has said, we feel that the metro consumer is more price sensitive than the Tier 2, Tier 3. For us, the Tier 2, Tier 3 customer seems to be the best customer possible, maybe because there is very little choice available in the small towns, so if the proposition is good, he buys. The guy in the metro has so much to do, so much choices, that he takes his own sweet time. So pricing as a pressure seems to be more in metros from a consumer's point of view than in the Tier 2, Tier 3. But coming back again from a long term and a short term, I think that's where the more loyal guy is sitting. The fence sitters are all sitting in the metros because they'll keep jumping. In terms of infrastructure, in a virtual e-commerce or a retail business, the most important part is about making the delivery happen. And I shudder to say this, but we are one country, but when it comes to movement of goods, we're not one country. Moving goods from one state to the other is a nightmare, and that's the reason why people haven't built infrastructures to really cater to the country. For us, that is the number one priority. It's an expensive thing. It's a tedious one because you've got to create warehousing hubs all over the country. You've got to build delivery networks in the length and breadth of the country. Today, we are delivering products in close to 3,000 cities in the country. And the difference is that we are delivering products not to a hub or a spoke, but to the consumer's doorstep. To do that, the infrastructure that you need from a logistics is huge. We've got now 15 warehouses across the country. We work with all the large couriers, logistics partners like DHL, Blue Darts. Plus, we are building technologies to monitor movement of goods real time. And on top of that, if that wasn't enough, India is a cash economy. So most people recruit into a transaction through cash. So cash collection as a mechanism is yet another logistics or an infra need, which will eventually build Tier 2, Tier 3 for us. But I personally think the opportunity is humongous.
Thanks. So I think clearly massive opportunities in Tier 2, Tier 3. I think some of the panelists have spoken about some of the challenges, but I wouldn't mind maybe expanding on that a little in the discussion and ask the question, what can go wrong? In fact, maybe even better, what has gone wrong? If you're happy to share an example within your business, what have you learned on this journey that you think is important for others to adhere to? So maybe Sarat, maybe I'm looking at you, so I'll invite you to give the first answer.
When we talk about the challenges, probably if I have to look at my business, yes, obviously supply chain becomes a challenge. Delivery of the product on the right times becomes a challenge. And keeping the quality intact is a challenge. Because obviously we are into a business where the product has to be customized as per the need of the customer. It has to be tailor-made and has to be delivered exactly as per the specification and quality. So the challenge to replicate that kind of a service is sometimes difficult because maybe you don't get that kind of a manpower to whom you can actually train them. And as what rightly said, sometimes, sending it from a metro city to that smaller town, logistically, it takes a lot of time. So I personally feel that is one of the very big challenge what we face particularly, and we've been working on it from a very long time.
And anything specific in terms of how you've attacked some of those problems around maybe skills in particular?
Yes, the places where we find that maybe the supply chain is not very efficient, sending the product on time to the customers is not very efficient. We have created small hubs where we are actually creating that infrastructure of doing and replicating the service there and then itself. So, but that particular creating a small hub is an expensive proposition. So we try and do in such a way that it is able to service at least more than 4 or 5 towns which are interconnected so that the things become cost effective.
I would just urge the physical retailers and the brand owners to look at e-commerce and virtual retail as a partner rather than a competitive force. Reason for that is that if you have to penetrate tier 2, tier 3, there'll be 100 issues in terms of real estate cost, infrastructure, supply chain. We become an automatic choice for everyone to maximize the tier 2, tier 3 opportunity rather than debate about it.
So that's a very good point, because I guess a lot of business models are being built, on some assumptions that we have today. In terms of rental costs, for example, people talk about rental costs being quite attractive in tier 2, tier 3, but I presume over time these rental costs are going to accelerate, as we've seen elsewhere. And is there a danger we're building business models, based on assumptions that aren't going to hold for the future? I don't know, Ashok, whether you've got any views as to whether or not, sort of your company or other companies, whether that's a concern or not.
Actually, I wouldn't be able to comment on this, but I definitely know that as the rental increases in the tier 2 and tier 3, the retailers are going to focus more on same store efficiency, and that's going to bring in an opportunity for us to help them remotely manage the store from their centralized location rather than trying to manage them on a classified basis of tier 1 and tier 2. So I'm sure that the retailers, as the rental goes up, are going to focus on operational efficiencies of same store efficiencies.
Okay. Terrific. Okay. Well, I think probably it's time to see if we want to open it up to the audience for any questions that you may have. So I can see someone's hand straight in the air. So maybe quickly introduce yourself, who you want to answer the question, and just fire it out.
Represent Donier Decot. We have about 200 stores in tier 2, tier 3 cities. I actually was very curious to learn about the e-commerce, and what I was really debating was the e-commerce really a platform for the metro cities where people don't have the time to go shop and they're shopping there, or is it really used by the customers from the tier 2, tier 3 cities who don't have access to these brands and are shopping online?
We've got, like I said, we've got 5,000 cities. Only, I think, 2,900 or 3,000 cities have a motorable road. But all 5,000 of them have internet, television, electricity, right? E-commerce, virtual retail is the alternative distribution platform, which is the quickest way for a city brand to go national, or a regional brand to become national, even an international brand to get into India. I think is the quickest way to do it. You mentioned you're from Donier, right? Okay, we do suit lengths and things like that on television. A connected category. Till 1 year ago, I, for one, was very certain that we would not be able to sell saris either on television or on the internet, simply because there's a particular way a woman buys a sari. She knows what she wants to buy, but till she doesn't see 500 others, she just doesn't feel like buying the one that she came in with. So selling one sari on television and asking a consumer to buy that, we thought was going to be difficult. Today we do about 15,000 saris a day of one design, and 60% of those come from tier 2, tier 3 cities. Okay? The point I'm trying to make is, if you've got the product right, if you've got your proposition right, and you can manage the delivery, consumer behavior in terms of buying is changing very, very rapidly. So anyone who says that a particular thing can't be sold, I think living in the past.
This question with Anupam, I'm, as Sonia said, I'm Sapan, Director of Donier Industries. We are also running a retail, as she already mentioned, in tier 2 and tier 3 towns. So what do you feel difference between COFO and FOFO, like company-owned operated versus franchisee-operated stores? And what's, in terms of bottom line also, it makes a difference?
Sure. See, as far as difference between company and the franchise-operated, definitely there are advantages of both and disadvantages. And you need to see in the given situation. The franchise-operated store definitely brings the relationship and the connect with, like Julie rightly pointed out, that the relationship is very important in small towns. And when a franchise opens it, brings that relationship with him. And a company-owned store may not bring in those relationships because you're hiring somebody and the relationships will be built. And franchise, because of he being there, the costs are definitely more controlled, and he himself becomes the manager. So it is definitely more cost effective also. At the same time, a company-owned stores provides better experience, better environment, and a better brand image, because they are considering a lot of better, I would say, factors in terms of the training, in terms of putting the right standards in place. So company-owned stores are important for brand building and long-term objectives. And to make it more, I would say, profitable, I think a franchise operation in tier 2, tier 3 towns can be more cost-effective.
How do you define tier 2 and tier 3 in terms of populations?
For me, all markets beyond four metros or the mini metros, I would take them as tier 2, tier 3 towns. And you can classify them in population as well. So we take about more than 5 lakh population as tier 2.
Good afternoon. My name is Priyanka. I represent Red Quanta. We are mystery service providers. A very, very basic question. Indians are finally looking at customer service in a big way. Where do you think the gap lies? What is the difference between the customer, say, in the metros and the tier 2, tier 3? Because for me as a customer, a repeat would happen if the service is great. Where do you see the gap, and what do you consider as challenges going forward?
Anybody in particular you'd like to answer the question?
They're all experts, so anybody would do.
You know, as I mentioned earlier, it's not as if the customer in tier 2, tier 3 cities is not as discerning as the customer in the metros. But there is a subtle difference. The subtle difference there is, you know, what in a tier 1 city is considered to be professional behavior may not necessarily be considered as good behavior when it comes to, you know, interpersonal interaction. And therefore, what I said that, you know, in tier 2, tier 3 cities, the customer relationship management has to be much more touchy-feely than possibly in a tier 1 city. And again, I must hasten to add, it's not as if the tier 2 city or tier 3 city customer is less discerning. And to give you an example, and maybe to bolster the case for e-commerce, you know, what we are finding is that, you know, in terms of our customer feedback mechanism, more complaints come out of tier 2, tier 3 cities through the internet when they get onto the site, they write us, than in tier 1 cities. So, which means that those are aware customers, those people are quite connected, so to say.
So in my opinion, as what has been mentioned by Sandeep, the customers in a metro city, yes, they are more professional, they are more demanding in terms of service. And the Tier 2 towns or Tier 3 town customers, it depends a lot about relationship, how the store manager or how the staff relationship is. It also depends a lot about, as I said earlier also, about commitment of the right product, because a Tier 2 customer is actually looking for a genuine product. So, and if he's not very comfortable, his trust has not been built up, then it is very difficult, to get that customer back. So because they are anyway exposed to the other metros, because they are anyway going and buying it. So if money is not a problem, then they can go to any other cities and do that purchase. So it is important that the service in terms of giving them the right product, what is required, it's not about, I will still say it's not about the price, but yes, the market, if the market is different, then we need to have the different price points, products, and if it is not a luxury market, obviously you don't need a luxury product. But then yes, service becomes a very important factor and commitment becomes a very important factor for that customer.
Why should there be a difference? It's not like you want to sell a good quality product to the metro guy and a bad quality product to... So I think it's the same. What's important is that because of lack of opportunities in the Tier 2, Tier 3, you have a better possibility of building a stronger, lasting brand relationship with the Tier 2, Tier 3 than in the metro. But service and quality will have to be hygiene.
Hi. My question to the gentleman from Gili. Where would you build in Tier 2? Would you build malls or would you build high street, and why?
Interestingly, there are not too many malls in Tier 2, 3, okay, though there are some coming in. But in the last 3-4 years that we have expanded, we have largely been on the high streets in the Tier 2 and Tier 3 towns.
Any just because of no malls being there, or is there a particular business model that you have?
No. One is that the Tier 2 and 3 markets normally work around a concept of a bazaar or, main market street. Okay, and that's where the large part of the population congregates and meets up and, does their shopping. So the entire street generally takes care of the needs of the consumers, right from the apparels to, everything. So from the footfall point of view and from the conversions point of view, it makes sense to be on the high street over there.
They just want to focus on what has been decided by the head office.
I think the response of high streets in Tier 2 and Tier 3 towns is much better, and it creates better economics to be on high street than into the mall. The cost of operation in a mall is fairly expensive compared to the business or the footfall it generates.
And I would like to add, as what Rahul has rightly pointed out, in any of the smaller town, I mean, whether you term it as today Tier 2 or Tier 3, doesn't matter. When any of the retailer, when he's taking his store to Tier 2 or something, maybe the first thing he will see is where the market is actually, where the customers have been coming regularly for buying their all sorts of needs, products. So that particular market, the retailer will target first. And secondly, my experience, maybe I may be wrong, but I have some bitter experiences in Tier 2, Tier 3. If you go in a mall, what is the typical thing about that place is the malls are being built by people who are actually residing there. Somebody have the ownership of that mall, and he creates a mall, and the overall mall management is not as good as it's supposed to be. It has not been professionally handled because it has been built out of more of an aspiration that we want to create a mall inside a city, and the mall is there. But then getting that customers from that kind of a customer to that bringing up to the mall is not an easy job. So the conversion, what is there on the high street, is not the same as in the mall. I will rate it quite low, especially on those Tier 2, Tier 3. And then suddenly you see that maybe that one mall is unable to sustain, and then there is a second mall which has come up, and then there is a third mall which has come up. So it's very difficult sometimes.
I suppose the magic word over here for you is work on revenue sharing. This is what he said. no conditions attached, because tier 3 specifically, I'm sure you guys know if you spend so much of money making a mall, tier 3 specifically is still dominated by arcades. That's something, I hope you know about it. There are 2-3 floors, and that's a mall for them, because no other mall developer has reached there. So I suppose tier 2s have less of them, but tier 3s have a lot of them. But that's the magic word. I'm sure you're going to take care of it.
Okay, brilliant. Unfortunately, we've run out of time. I'm getting the wind up. So, yeah, great discussion today. Hopefully, lots of learnings for people. I think to steal a few comments from the panelists. I think it sounds like tier 2, 3 opportunity sounds like a fertile recruiting ground. I think Sandeep talked about that. I think interesting discussion about sort of whether or not you customize. But I think it's very clear that you need to treat customers in tier 2, tier 3 with the same level of service proposition. I think if you do that, by the sounds of it, you're almost going to get a more loyal consumer that's actually arguably less price sensitive than a lot of the other parts of India. Clearly still a lot of challenges to overcome. Infrastructure we talked about. I think skills we touched on. Would have liked to expand on that if we'd had more time, but I think skill development's a big thing. But I think also, sort of a key message that, came across to me is think about all the tools you have available. So I think the e-commerce, the technology angle came through very clearly here. So if anyone was in any doubt that tier 2, tier 3 is not ready for those sorts of technology solutions, then hopefully the discussion today has made you think again. So with that, I'd like to thank all the panelists for the great insights, great experience. So, appreciate you what you've provided to the audience. And again, thanks to the audience as well for some great questions and for listening in. So we'll close the session with that. Thank you.